Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy.
So our win is the 1998, but we're going to do a little sauntering back to the good old slaughtering 70s too. We're going to be all over the place.
Sauntering?
Yes. Expand your vocabulary.
Alright. Do we have to saunter?
Uh-huh.
It's just a weird way to say we're going back in time to discuss some shit.
We're going to be all over the place. But our where...
Which place?
Our where is known as the world of Coca-Cola.
Columbus?
What? What'd you say?
You were confusing the shit out of me. Columbus?
Columbus what?
Georgia.
Yeah, we'll be in Georgia. You son bitch, you guessed it.
Haha! That's because I already gave you that snippet when I did another one in Georgia.
I thought yours was Pepsi.
No. I literally... Columbus, Georgia.
Well, son bitch. I said in here, another hint, if you needed it, the state motto is wisdom, justice, and moderation.
Is wisdom and justice in moderation in Georgia? Or they're just saying each of the three things. Moderation of what? Because it's not sugar.
It's moderation of wisdom and justice. Anyway, so you're going to have to get out your pen and paper, Claire, because this case, like I said, we're going to be all over the place. It's a doozy of a case. Oh, yeah, you and your clickety clicks.
Georgia.
We're going to start unpacking today's case in good old Atlanta, Georgia in 1998 with a nearly 3-year-old little girl named Christina. She was sitting in the back seat of her family's car watching her mama sing along with the radio as they drove down the road running errands. This would be the last memories Christina and her brother Joey would have of their 21-year-old mother, Melissa Wolfenbarger. Who is Melissa Patton Wolfenbarger? Melissa grew up in the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia, with her parents Norma and Carl Patton Jr. The couple were married in 1968. They had 2 daughters together.
You just confused the shit out of me. So Christina's 2 years old. The brother is in the car with her.
But he's younger, so he don't remember nothing.
He's younger than 2? Well, I don't think a 2-year-old's going to remember several years later anyway. But brother's in the car with Melissa, and now you jumped to Melissa's parents?
Yeah, so those are the last memories that Christina claims to have of her mom, is driving around running errands.
Yeah, bullshit.
And then her mom went missing. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our missing lady. And our missing lady, Melissa, her mom is Norma, and her father is Carl Patton Jr. So Carl and Norma were married in 1968. They ended up having 2 daughters together. Their oldest daughter is Tina Patton, which I thought it was really weird that their daughter's name is Tina, and then Melissa is their other daughter, and she has a daughter that she names Christina. It made this case a little on the confusing side, but we're just going to call Tina, Melissa's sister, Tina. And Tina was born in 1970. She was 7 years older than Melissa, who was born September 9th, 1977. And their pal, Carl, he worked in construction his whole life. I couldn't find what Norma did for a living, so I'm going to assume that maybe she just took care of the girls. Now, I'm going to take it upon myself to say that the Patton home was a bit chaotic. Not in a domestic violence type of chaos, but a variety of different chaoses, meaning Carl, Melissa and Tina's father, was arrested in the middle of 1983 for felony theft. He was convicted of the theft charge by November of 1983, and he was sentenced to a year in prison. He served a little over half of his sentence before he was paroled on May 2nd, 1984.
How old were the girls when all that happened? Like this happened when they were babies, infants? You didn't say when the... Well, maybe you did.
I did.
You just threw a lot of shit out in a span of 5 minutes of people, dates, and all that.
So Tina was born in 1970, so that would have made her 13.
She's 7 years older, so...
And Melissa was born in September 9th, 1977, so she's about 6. But he ended up being paroled. And as far as I'm aware, Carl didn't commit, or rather, he was not arrested for any other crimes other than that theft conviction. Melissa ended up falling in love in high school with a fellow classmate, a bad boy named Christopher Wolfenbarger. They married right out of high school, and they quickly had their 2 children, Christina and Joey. Now, Melissa and Christopher had a goal of saving up enough money to start a new life in California. Like, that was their dream. They wanted to move from Georgia to California. So Melissa would pick up extra shifts at the Waffle House, and to make extra cash, she also would make fake IDs on the side.
Well, that's an interesting skill, working at Waffle House and then ID making.
I feel like the people coming into Waffle House, she's got a pretty good clientele base for the fake IDs.
Yeah, I'm just saying where you learn the skill.
I have my suspicions, but Christopher, he had a bit of a time staying out of trouble. So the young couple were just kind of spinning their wheels, barely surviving. Their young marriage had reached a point where there were some nights that Melissa would choose to stay in a motel near the Waffle House rather than drive home to Christopher and their 2 young kids.
Well, shit. Then they can't be doing too bad.
Well, there was a domestic violence issue in the Wolfenbarger home. So during the summer of 1998, Christopher hit Melissa and dragged her down the sidewalk by her hair. Melissa was done. She was pressing charges. Christopher was arrested. However, when he appeared in front of the judge, he requested to speak to his wife in private, which the judge freaking allowed. And then Melissa dropped the charges and the couple got back together. Shame on that judge.
Maybe he was going to tattle that she did the ID thing and that if that happened, the kids were going to go to the state or whatever, threatening stuff.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. But still, I wish the judge didn't allow them alone time, because I feel like once there's a domestic violence situation,
Yeah, but what year is this?
1998.
Yeah, well, we're still not shedding a whole lot of light on the smackety smacks. And it's an older judge. He's probably thinking, I go home and beat my wife too.
Or he was thinking he's trying to keep a marriage with 2 young children together.
Maybe he was drunk.
Maybe. But they got back together. The violence didn't stop. The last time parents, Norma and Carl, heard from their daughter, Melissa, was on Thanksgiving of 1998. She called them to make plans for Christmas. She told her mother, Norma, the only thing she wanted for Christmas was a photo of herself with her grandfather. But when Christmas came and went without any word from Melissa, Norma and Carl began to worry about their daughter. But they felt there wasn't a whole lot of options for them because Melissa's a 21-year-old married mother of 2. Was it really their place to report her missing just because they haven't heard from her? They felt like her life got busy.
Our mom could have reported me missing plenty of times.
Dude, when I moved to Florida for a few years, she did report me missing.
She was wishing.
Sick. Our mom's been sick for a real long time. The concerned parents just kind of sat back and waited and hoped to hear from Melissa sooner rather than later. But after Melissa had missed Norma's birthday in February of 1999, the concerned parents decided to drive from their home in Locust Grove, Georgia, up to Atlanta, Georgia. And I was curious, so I Googled it, and I realized I didn't use exact addresses, right? So from Locust Grove, Georgia, to Atlanta, Georgia, it's 36 miles. So it's not far.
No.
And I realize at this point that I am a helicopter mom or overbearing or whatever you want to call me.
Because that's too far away for your child to be gone.
Well, if any of my kids go MIA and they're a mere 36 miles away, I wouldn't be waiting months to show up at their front door.
No. I'm going to say it's going to be different. Because it's one thing you live there. She doesn't live with them.
Yeah.
It's not like we don't know how often they checked in. So you could feasibly go, how long have you talked to our mother?
That's different.
It's not.
She doesn't like me.
But you don't know what kind of relationship these two had. It could have been a similar situation of it's still your mother. However, you need small doses kind of situation. And several months isn't abnormal.
Well, my kids... That's why I say for me, my butt's going to be at the door.
I'm still going to say it's going to depend when they grow up, and even if they move 30 miles away, how often they're checking in to whether or not that becomes normal.
Yeah, well, if I haven't heard from you by 7:05 every single morning, I'm texting you asking if you're dead. And if I don't
I
answer
know.
when you call, you leave me a message asking if I'm dead. So I
Well, I'm
think
not sure if maybe you'll get your messages in the afterlife. I'm just checking.
I think we might
Better
be.
safe than sorry.
And you know what? I didn't check in with our father repeatedly. And I can remember plenty of times where dad would dodge my calls. So I'd hop in the car and sometimes drag our
That's
sister.
because you're not only a helicopter parent, but you're a helicopter child.
And I would drive out with our sister to go check on him. And you know what? I trusted my gut. And every time I drove out there, he was up to some sort of irritating shenanigans, whether it be he got hospitalized and didn't want to tell anybody, and I'd have to track down what hospital he was in. I remember that easily without even like really thinking about different instances. There was at least 4 times.
You've been sick for a real long time.
Well, it's not nice. Anyway, so Norma and Carl drive up to Melissa and Christopher's house, and nobody's there.
I thought so. They got back together, so why wouldn't they try calling him?
So this is pre-cell phones ish. Cell phones were kind of new.
He still lives in the house.
So they called, but they're not getting any response.
All right.
Norma and Carl drive up to Melissa and Christopher's house, and nobody's there. And I don't just mean nobody was home. I mean, the house was vacant. They moved.
Oh.
Norma and Carl were like, what the heck? And so they started talking to the neighbors and learned that the family moved the week between Christmas and New Year's. And obviously, neighbors don't have a new address for the young family. Carl and Norma decided to go to the police and report their daughter missing, since even the neighbors couldn't remember the last time they saw Melissa before the family moved.
Then how did they know it was the whole family?
Well, because the kids left too. But when it was like, did you guys see Melissa? And they were like, you know what? I really don't know the last time I saw her. And then the parents are like, what the heck?
But we did see a body bag be hauled out.
So the police tracked down Christopher and asked him, where's Melissa? And Christopher told the police he didn't report her missing. He doesn't know where she is. He just figured Melissa left him and their 2 young children, Christina and Joey,
Like she done before.
to go pursue her dreams in California.
I thought they both wanted to go to California.
Well, with no proof of foul play, but also no way to contact her, Melissa would remain a missing person. So this is in February that they went up there, right? Meanwhile, on April 29th, a severed human head is found soaking in bleach and badly decomposing in a black trash bag on the side of the road. And Norma and Carl feared it was their missing daughter Melissa's head.
How was it just found?
Because it was in a bag, kind of like off in the brush. But the police identified the head as belonging to another missing person who was male. So police failed to do any real investigating in the area where the head was discovered, because a few months later, on June 3rd of 1999, more dismembered human remains were located in black trash bags near where the head was found.
No, I think that's weird to not do any searching of the area, because where's the rest of it?
Right? And this time, the bags contained decomposing arms and legs. A torso was never, still to this day, never located. And police determined that the body was dismembered using a reciprocating saw, which, ew.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Those weren't clean cuts.
So Melissa, she remained missing. Her parents have no answers. And Christopher and Melissa's 2 young children.
Hey, my brain hole got stuck on the reciprocating saw, because at one point me and Dave tried to disassemble a deer with one, and it was real messy.
Oh.
So we had somebody give us like bone pieces, the carcass for the dogs, but it's like I can't just give the dogs an entire beer, or why do I keep trying to call it a beer? A deer carcass.
It's your kombucha.
Maybe. But so we were trying to cut it up in the tub.
Oh, jeez.
I know this sounds real disgusting, but wood splinters were everywhere. It was just like, it was
Sure, it was wood.
disgusting.
That's not wood. That's bone.
Well, whatever. You know what I mean? But splinters, I'm thinking of what you should be using a reciprocating saw on, is where my brain is going. It doesn't just jump to cutting bone, but it wouldn't be a recommended tool.
That's disgusting for you, ma'am.
But that's why when you said it, I can...
You had flashbacks. You didn't realize you had PTSD of having a murder scene.
Well, I remember when Dave was doing the cutting, and I'm just seeing bits fly everywhere, and I'm like, I gotta clean this up. Fuck, man. This is supposed to be contained.
That's disgusting.
I mean, it worked. It's not a...
Not a clean process.
If I were to do it again, I wouldn't do it again.
Well, Melissa would remain missing, and Christopher and Melissa's 2 young children, Christina and Joey, they were dropped off at their grandmother's house, Christopher's mother. She ended up raising the kids because Christopher couldn't keep his act together to raise his babies. He was in and out of jail for stupid petty crimes. And the children would grow up being told that their mother left them and their father, they weren't worth staying out of jail for.
He's a piece of shit.
Yeah. So it was really sad because they grew up being told their mom left. And not only is it sad for the kids, but Norma and Carl, they have no idea where their daughter is, and their grandchildren have now been stripped away from them.
Did they believe she left?
No, they always suspected that Chris did something to her, but there's no proof of anything, so she's just missing. However, like many of the cases I've been doing lately, Melissa's case would go ice cold for several years until an unusual break in the case would come. And this is where I tell you, things are about to get really confusing. I will try to go slow for you.
Slower than what you did when you threw it all on me?
Yeah. So now, put a pin in Melissa. Detectives are sitting back and they're trying to solve the cold cases. No police officer likes knowing that they have a case on their desk that they can't solve. So a different file is opened, and this is a cold case more than 25 years old. It was from 1977, and it was the murder of 31-year-old Liddy Evans. Police had a suspect at the time. They had found blood in the trunk of the suspect's car, but being that it was 1977, they couldn't prove the blood in the trunk actually belonged to the victim. Does that make sense? They could do the blood typing, and that's about it. But the district attorney forced the sheriffs to release their suspect from custody due to a lack of evidence until October 2003, when police cracked that file open and submitted the DNA of the murder victim, Liddy Evans, and the blood that was found in their suspect's trunk, and it came back as a match. Police are both thrilled and frustrated because their original suspect, the original feller they arrested and had to release, was in fact their murderer. So on February 23rd, 2003, police go and arrest Melissa's father, Carl Patton Jr.
Ooh.
He's now been arrested for murder. Those 2003 DNA laws, they take his DNA, put it in the system, and boy, let me tell you, did shit hit the fan. Carl was linked to a murder from the 1970s that was clumped together in the media known as the Flint River murders. Carl's wife, Norma, was his accomplice. Norma works out a deal where she tells officers everything in exchange for immunity. And since the officers have no way to really connect her to the crimes, she's better suited to them as their snitch, so they give her the deal. Now let's put a mini pin in that, because we're going to get back to Carl and Norma's shenanigans of the 70s.
Everybody else was doing it. Why not?
If that wasn't enough to blow your mind, while Carl's DNA pinged in the system for an unsolved murder in 1977.
Why did they take Carl's DNA?
Because he was arrested for felony murder. And since he's now in prison and he has had to submit DNA for being arrested for a felony.
Who did he murder that he got arrested?
What? I just told you. In 1977, police had arrested a suspect that they found blood in the car and they had a body, and they were forced to let their suspect go.
Right.
But then in 2003, when they ran the DNA that was found in the trunk of their suspect's vehicle against the victim, the body that they had, they were able to prove that the dead body was in fact in their suspect's vehicle.
So they collected DNA in 77, found a body in 2003, and that's...
No. Okay, let's backtrack here, lady.
That's why I was saying, you said in 77 he was arrested, they had to let him go because they didn't have evidence.
So they had found a body dumped in Flint River, and it was Liddy Evans, 31-year-old Liddy Evans. They connected Liddy Evans to Carl.
Right.
In 1977, they had arrested him.
I got that.
But they couldn't prove that Liddy Evans' blood was what was in his trunk until 2003, when somebody cracked open Liddy's file and just happened to run her DNA against the blood that was found in Carl's trunk in 1977, and that came back as a match. So they went and arrested him because they could prove Her blood was in his car in 1977.
That's what I was asking. I thought you were saying he got arrested for something in 2003. That's when they collected his DNA and matched it in 77. But they just opened a cold case. DNA has advanced, and now they were able to run DNA that they had from 77 to solve that crime.
Right. And now that he's been arrested, they take his DNA and then submit that into CODIS, and it comes back to another murder.
Got it.
That was attached in the media as the Flint River murders. Now they're going to use Norma to snitch on everything that was going on in the 70s, and we'll get back to that. But if that didn't blow your mind enough, while Carl's DNA pinged in the system for that murder and police are working on that, a crime scene investigator named Cheryl McCullum, she decided to start her own podcast and was approached by Norma and Carl because they wanted Cheryl to look into their daughter's missing person case. So Cheryl talks about Melissa's case on her podcast. The right person hears it. A tip comes in that the body that was dismembered and discovered in 1999 was never officially identified. So they go over and they run the DNA from the body through CODIS, and bam, Carl, who's in the system now, pings again, but this time he pings it as a familial match to the dismembered pieces found in April and June.
Uh-oh.
Police had misidentified the remains as male. They were actually the remains of 21-year-old Melissa Patton Wolfenbarger.
Oh, that is fucked up. He killed his daughter?
No, it just pinged in the system that they were related. So they were able to identify that that was in fact Melissa. She wasn't missing. She was murdered. But my mind was blown that a serial killer's daughter was murdered. What?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Are we sure you didn't do it?
Hang on. We're going to figure all this out. That's why I said it's a whole lot to unpack this case. At least the kids know that their mom didn't abandon them. I mean, I know it's all still sad, but
their mother's head was found in a bag. Yeah, it's kind of sad, Andrea.
I don't know which is worse, knowing that your mom didn't want you and left, or knowing that it's not like she left on her own. She wanted you.
You don't know which is worse? Her mother's head found in a bag? I think that's worse, Andrea. If she was alive and just in California, you could patch that up. Turns out you can't just Band-Aid her head back on.
Okay, whatever. So put a pin.
I don't know which is worse. Hey, let me know not to have you on any medical decisions. I don't know which is worse. Her to be decapitated or her go somewhere else.
Well, you better make up your mind, because you just told me the other day that if you ever got put on life support, I'm going to have to pull the plug because Dave's not going to ever do it. So you better make up your mind on that one. Uh-huh.
Gotta be some definite pros and cons here.
Put a pin in Melissa's case. So she's no longer a missing person. It's now a homicide investigation. Now we're going to go back to Carl, and he's arrested in 2003. His daughter is identified as having been murdered. And now let's hear what dear sweet wife blabbed to save her own hide. All right. So Carl had a friend who was a firefighter named Joe Cleveland. You got your pen ready?
I lost my pen somewhere. Oh, no, that's in it. I haven't even gotten up.
Check your J wallet.
Oh, I put it in my hair.
So Joe had an aunt named Marie Jackson Wyatt. Marie was married to a man named Fred. Okay, so you got Marie and Fred, aunt and uncle to Joe, who is Carl's friend.
Mm-hmm.
Maria took out a life insurance policy on her cheating lion-ass husband Fred and told Carl and Joe she'd give them $15,000 to go kill Fred, Joe's uncle. And Carl and Joe are like, all right. So on November 12th, 1977, the men shot and killed Joe's 45-year-old uncle, Fred Wyatt. They also shot and killed Fred's mistress, 45-year-old Betty Jo Eflin. Carl and Joe then dumped Betty Jo's remains into the Flint River. They put Fred in his car and left him parked on the railroad tracks. And eventually a train came whipping through and the car was demolished, making it look like an accident. Which, by the way, if a train would come through right now, it would be really convenient. And
I was going to say, of all days for it to be quiet.
So Norma continued to tell police about the adventures of the 1970s. She said about a month after Joe and Carl shot and killed Fred and Betty Jo, Carl confessed to Norma that he was afraid Joe had blabbed to some of their acquaintances about the murders they had committed. And Carl told Norma he wanted to get rid of Joe for being a blabbermouth. So on December 17th, 1977, Carl lured Joe and his girlfriend Liddy Evans to Norma and Carl's home. Carl then shot and killed both Joe and Liddy with a shotgun. Now, keep in mind, Norma and Carl have Tina, who's about 7 years old, and either Norma is heavily pregnant with Melissa, or Melissa was a newborn at the time of these two murders in their house.
I would say she was a newborn, because maybe that's why he had all this free time.
Maybe.
Or not a newborn, but almost arriving.
Perhaps. But Norma and Carl then dragged the bodies of both Joe and Liddy out of their house, placed them in the back of their van, which is how blood got in the back of the vehicle. Both bodies were wrapped into sleeping bags and then dumped into the Flint River. Their bodies were discovered a few days later, but in the meantime, Norma washed up the blood from the crime scene in their house and destroyed the evidence. While Norma was washing out the van, Carl burned several pieces of furniture and other blood-soaked items in their backyard to help destroy the evidence. Police would arrive at the Patton home by December of 1977 to question Carl about Joe and Liddy's murders, and that's when they found the blood in the trunk or in the back of the van that Norma had missed. But all police could prove was that the blood type was the same as Liddy's, and they had to let Carl go. And by the way, a glimpse into my strange, demented imagination, and I totally blame this on you, Claire, for helping my imagination grow.
I don't feel like it's necessary for you to say it like that.
So, you know the picture I sent you of Norma earlier as an older woman? I picture that older woman holding a newborn like a football while breastfeeding and mopping blood up and spraying a hose in the back of the van with the other hand.
Where is the thanks to me?
I don't typically have that vivid of an active imagination.
Yes, you do. do not coin me with that appreciation. No, thank you. Mm-mm.
I blame you. So on March 8th, 2003, Carl Patton pled guilty to the murder charges for 45-year-old Fred Wyatt and 45-year-old Betty Jo Eflin. He claimed remorse for his actions, and since he pled guilty, he was given 2 life sentences with the opportunity of parole in 20 years. He was then extradited to the neighboring county and pled guilty to the murders of Joe Cleveland and 31-year-old Liddy Evans. Carl received 2 more life sentences with parole in 20 years. Now, Norma also pled guilty for her role in the murders of Joe and Liddy. She received 12 months probation and a $1,000 fine.
Well, fun.
Right? That's barely a slap on the wrist. About a month after Carl's trial ended, he accidentally confessed to a 5th murder. His friend, remember Joe that he murdered, the firefighter friend? Mm-hmm. Remember Joe's Aunt Marie that hired him to do the murderings? Also known as Marie Jackson Wyatt, that lady.
He killed her too?
She was a woman scorned. So she asked the menfolk to kill her cheating husband, that lady. Remember her? Turns out Fred was Marie's 2nd marriage.
Yeah.
Her first husband was a man named Richard Russell Jackson. Marie had gone to her nephew Joe and his little buddy Carl and told them Richard was abusive to her. So she offered the men some money to kill her supposedly abusive husband, Richard. Carl and Joe agreed to help her out. So on March 9th, 1973, they lured Richard into their car, pulled out a .22 caliber pistol, and aimed it at Richard. He fought the men. Somehow Richard managed to escape from the car. Carl and Joe ran after Richard, quickly catching up to him, tackling him to the ground, and then they unloaded the .22 into the terrified man, killing him. That case had gone cold until Carl was sitting in his cell thinking about how unfair it was that he was just trying to do the job he was done hired for, and he don't know how he accidentally confessed to that there crime, but he did.
You know what else is unfair?
So during this new 5th trial, Richard's daughter, Gladys Elaine Jackson, took the stand to make a victim's impact statement, where she absolutely threw the courts into chaos when she thanked Carl for murdering her father. She said not only was he abusing her mother, Marie, but he's also abusing her. And she thanked him for killing not only her father, Richard, but also for killing her stepfather, Fred, because they were both abusive to Marie and to herself. So she was grateful that Carl decided to kill them. Richard's family, however, were not nearly as grateful as Gladys. In fact, they wanted the death penalty for Carl. But because he's the one that confessed to it, they don't have a lot to prove it.
Yeah.
Because he's remorseful, he decides to plead guilty on May 14th, 2003 to the murder of Richard Jackson, and he received a 5th life sentence with the possibility of parole in 20 years. Marie Jackson Wyatt, she was never charged for her roles in the 3 murders of Richard, Fred, or Betty Jo because she passed away of natural causes in 1988. Police believed for a long time, same thought process as you, Claire, that maybe Carl and Norma were possibly responsible for their daughter Melissa's murder. But because of the way the parents were pushing for detectives to solve the murder and doing more investigating, and thanks to the persistence of Norma and detectives and the podcast lady, Cheryl, that was the crime scene investigator, the ball started rolling very quickly. And on August 6th of this year, 2024, Christopher Wolfenbarger was arrested for the 1998 murder of his wife, Melissa Patton Wolfenbarger. It is an ongoing case, so there's not a lot of details available to the public, but things we do know: Christopher had a history of domestic violence with Melissa. We know that she tried to leave him a few times, and like with many other domestic violence situations, it is hard for the women to leave sometimes, and men. Where her remains were discovered, it was in a wooded area near a glass shop where Christopher worked in the 1990s until he was fired for stealing a reciprocating saw.
Ew.
We also know that Melissa was dismembered by a reciprocating saw.
Yeah, but how do you prove that was the one?
It's not a lot, but the pieces are definitely coming together. I figured they must have gone out to the house that they lived in, and you know how the blood evidence kind of sticks around.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe popped up some flooring. I have no idea. But Christopher's currently sitting in jail awaiting his day in court so that he can say, I done ain't did nothing. And then Norma and Carl, they're still married. And Norma did say in an interview, which made me roll my eyes, that Melissa's murder showed us what we put other families through, and nobody deserves that. Those families didn't deserve it, and we don't deserve it either. It took their daughter to be murdered for them to realize that they shouldn't have been murdering other people, really. And I thought this was a weird side note. Norma and Carl's other daughter, or Tina, she apparently got herself into some trouble, and she was put on probation in 2013. She was 43. I didn't dig into what she did or if she went to prison or whatever and then got put on probation, but she was 43 years old. And since she was still not behaving herself, the warden to the prison where Carl is banned her from being able to visit with her father in the prison. And I stumbled onto a website where one of Tina's sons was begging people to sign a petition to try to change the warden's mind and allow Tina to visit with her father in the prison. And let me tell you, the responses of people on the internet, they were vicious. So many comments of like, apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I don't feel sorry for her. If she gets getting in trouble and not following whatever her probation is, then she deserves to have more rights taken. They're lucky they didn't just throw her back in jail. But seems like that was a crime family. Because, I mean, even though Melissa was murdered, she was making fake IDs.
Yeah.
So
they all had some issues following the rules.
They sure did. But it's sad, and I hope that Melissa's kids get whatever closure they need. It sucks that their father was the one that was arrested, but I guess it benefits them that it's not like their dad raised them and they love their father and can't believe that he did it. They do believe that they did it. And Melissa and Christopher's daughter, Christina, has reached out to Norma, and they've grown very close. I feel like it could have been made slightly worse if the kids were raised by a loving father and then found out that that loving father was in fact the murderer piece of shit that killed their mom, versus growing up knowing, yeah, this person's our father. We don't know him. He's a piece of shit. Oh yeah? Find out that he killed our mom too. You know what I mean?
It was a wild connection of Melissa's head being identified or triggering the whole thing.
Yeah.
And also that someone else did the murdering.
I thought it was crazy. And I thought it was also crazy that Norma was like, it took their daughter being murdered to realize they shouldn't have been murdering other people. What?
People are stupid.
Yeah. But it did take me a while because I couldn't quite wrap my head around why did Carl all of a sudden get arrested? And it wasn't until after he was arrested that Melissa's body was identified. And I was like, I don't understand. I couldn't put the pieces together. So that one, it did take me a bit of time to put that together. And then that's when I realized that somebody just cracked open a cold case. One of the detectives opened up a cold case, and that was for 31-year-old Lydia Evans. And they matched her DNA to the DNA that was in the suspect's vehicle. And that's what just started all that ball rolling on things. Can you hear that I sound sick? I feel like you can hear it.
You sound but like you got boogers real deep in your sinus hole.
All right.
Don't what me like that's the weirdest shit you've heard today.
I didn't say what. I said all right.
Whatever.
But that's all I've got.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.